Hello and welcome everyone to the daily news analysis of 27th of September 2023। तो आज के इम्पोर्टेंट आर्टिकल पहले देख लेते हैं। जुडिशरी is losing talent as government sits on names according to Supreme Court. Then cheetah may be flown in from countries. Assessment of space situation done to ensure safety of Aditya L1. Balsams in full bloom add to visual treat in Mannar. Then identity pangs. With climate change tackling new disease scenarios, is Ukraine's counter-offensive working? Indo-Pacific region a wave of interdependency. Army chief days when a few nations set agenda are over. Jaishankar tells at UNGA Indians eat more salt than WHO recommendation. 95% of components used in Indian rockets are indigenous, says ISRO chief. Then Central Substance Angel Tax Rule. Nepal says no to China's security initiatives. India is running out of phosphorus. Does the answer lie in our sewage? Then Judiciary is losing talent as government sits in on names according to Supreme Court. The Supreme Court on Tuesday said the judiciary was losing fresh talent as never before because of prospective candidates shortlisted for judgeship in the High Courts give up as months tick by without a decision from the government on their appointment. Many a bright legal mind willing to sacrifice their law practice to join the bench have fallen victim to segregation of names by the government, who seemingly prefer one name to the other for the known reasons. A bench of Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul and Sudhanshu Dhulia noted, people are declining to come. We endeavor to get the best talent. The bench has lost good talent because of segregation. They drop out with withdraw. I do not want to take any names, but we lost one or two very good people after they withdrew. Just Kaul addressed Attorney General R. Venkatramani appearing for the center. Justice Kaul drew the Attorney General attention to 70 names recommended for judgeship by High Court Collegium, which have been pending with the government for over 10 months. Since November 2022, 70 posts of High Court judges lie vacant. Once you receive the recommendation of the High Court Collegium, you have to do some basic processing and forward it to the Supreme Court Collegium. You have not done even that, he noted. He said there was no word from the government on 26th transports recommended by the Supreme Court Collegium. The memorandum of procedure requires the government to appoint names reiterated by the Collegium without further delay. Senior advocate Arvind Datar and advocate Amit Pai, appearing for the Petitioner Advocates Association of Bengaluru, said segregation of certain names out of the list provided by the Collegium to the government is very embarrassing. Advocate Prashant Bhushan said the government segregated names despite the Collegium forbidding the practice. He said it was a time for the court to crack the whip and howl someone up for contempt. Mr. Venkatramani has asked for a week's time to inquiry about their status. The Collegium recommendation for the appointment of Chief Justice to a very sensitive court is pending, Justice Kaul said. He was referring to the Collegium's recommendation to the government to appoint Delhi High Court Judge Justice Siddharth Mridul as Chief Justice of Manipur High Court. The court gave the Attorney General time till October 9. The next day of hearing, the coax the government into action on pending judicial appointment and transfers. बेसिकली ये जो है गवर्नमेंट की जो ड्यूटीज है उस वो लैक कर रहा है, इसीलिए ये वाला पर्सन दिया गया है। जैसे कि नेम को लेकर बोला जा रहा है, रिकमेंडेशन को लेकर। तो चलिए दूसरे वाले आर्टिकल देखते हैं। चीता में बी फ्लोन इन फ्रॉम कंट्रीज with 6 adult cheetah dead within the first year of their relocation to India. Wildlife experts associated with the project Cheetah are considering importing the next batch of big cat from countries other than South Africa and Nambia. Experts told the Hindu that experiences with the animals over the past year were prompting a rethink. A major factor was some of the animals' vulnerability to injection due to their tendency to form winter coats during the summer and monsoon month. A biological adaptation to the winter, the covering in the wet and humid condition of India proved to be detrimental as it facilitated fatal infection that may have killed at least two of the animals, with South Africa and Nambia being the southern hemisphere. There are concerns that future batches of cheetah from these countries could be similarly vulnerable. Another expert privy to the project said that other than the home country factors such as logistic age and gender would be considered before a decision to finalize the next batch of cheetah was taken in December or January. तो ये वाला जो आर्टिकल है पहले पिछले साल मोदी जी के जन्मदिन पे लाया गया था। चीता चीता जितने सारे हैं उनमें से 6 कैट्स जो हैं 6 बिग कैट्स जो हैं उनका मौत हो गया। क्यों हो गया? क्योंकि वो अडॉप्ट नहीं कर पाए, हमारे क्लाइमेट से अडॉप्ट नहीं कर पाए, तो इसलिए उनका हो गया, मतलब डेथ हो गया। तो अभी जो नेक्स्ट जो बैच आने वाला है, इसलिए ये सारे ऑब्जर्वेशन किया जा रहा है कि उन्हें सही प्रॉपर ट्रीटमेंट मिले ताकि वो जीवित रह सकें। ये वाला आर्टिकल इसी के रिगार्डिंग है। तो नेक्स्ट नेक्स्ट चलते हैं। असेसमेंट ऑफ स्पेस सिचुएशन डन टू एंश्योर सेफ्टी ऑफ आदित्य L1. While the Indian Space Research Organization Aditya L1 spacecraft is on its way towards some Sun Earth Lagrange point 1, the space agency has done an assessment of the space situation around L1 to ensure safety of the spacecraft. Launched on September 2, Aditya L1 is India's first mission dedicated to studying the Sun. The spacecraft commenced its journey L1 on September 18 and is expected to reach L1 by January 2024. Aditya L1 will operate in a hollow orbit around the Sun Earth L1 point located approximately 1.5 million km from Earth according to ISRO. Hollow orbit are periodic three-dimensional orbit around a Lagrange point L1, L2 and L3 and involve an out-of-plane motion component relative to the primary bodies. The orbit is large enough in size to be continuously viewed from Earth and would appear to form a halo around the Lagrange point L1. Here L1 for Aditya L1. There are currently 4 operational spacecraft at L1: Wind, Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, Advanced Composition Explorer and Deep Space Climate Observatory. Several operation spacecraft are currently stationed at L1. These spacecraft at L1 provide vital early warnings on adverse space weather events that help protect orbiting space assets and ground-based infrastructure. ISRO added. Despite the extremely sparse population in L1 and vast separation between them, close approach assessment for the operational spacecraft at Lagrange point orbit is desirable because of the large positional uncertainty and sensitivity to the other pertuative forces. Balsam in full bloom add to visual treat in Mannar. Presenting a visual feast to tourist, balsam genius impotence are in full bloom in Mannar called Pasithumba and Unapuvu. Locally, its small pink flowers are a major attraction along the Devikulam stretch of the Kochi-Dhanuskodi National Highway. Balsam are also known as Touch Me Not because of the bursting of mature seeds and seed distributions. Botanists say The large-scale flowering of balsam indicates that microclimate is still active in the Munnar Hill station. Of the 220 balsam species in India, 135 are found in the southern western Ghats. Jammu Augustine, former botany professor at the St. Thomas College, Pala, says Idukki is known for the diversity of balsam, with scientists terming the district as Balsam Paradise. Anamudi, the highest mountain in the Western Ghat and surrounding high range, are known for diversity of wild balsams, says Dr. Augustine. New species of balsams are being discovered from these areas. There are balsams endemic to the ranges. There are more than 30 species of balsams in the Periyar Tiger Reserve itself. He said, humid habitat, the normal life of balsam is from June to December. The plant mainly grow inside pocket of forest areas. With the loss of specific habitat, many species have become rare, threatened, or even extinct. These freshly Orophytic herb usually prefer humid habitat and completes the life cycle in the rainy seasons. He says balsams are a major indicator species of climate change. If climate change occurs in any area, it will reflect in the plant population, says Dr. Augustine. A forest official says 46 balsam species are found in the Munnar landscape spread from Munnar to Chinnar and Bison Valley. Munnar Wildlife Warden S.B. Vinod says Munnar is the major habitat of balsams and there are over 40 wild species in the Eraviculam National Park. The Forest Department ensures the protection of balsams in the forest areas. He says Prasad G, working plants officer, says 46 species of balsam have been discovered in the altitude of Mannar. No other places in the world has such diversity. The next way, identity pangs. Identity pangs. In an incautiously titled report on decentralized finance and digital assets released last Saturday, global rating measure Moody's Investor Service has flagged some uncomfortable home truth about India's ambitious digital identification ID program for residents. Aadhaar, as the world's largest digital ID programs with biometric and demographic details of over a billion residents, Aadhaar stands out for its scale, but at a broader level, the agency has red flagged security and privacy risks from centralized digital ID systems such as Aadhaar, where a single entity controls identity credential. Moody's, which has a mooted decentralized ID system that give users more control over their data, has also lent weight to worries about the efficacy of Aadhaar's biometric based authentication system to verify identities. The system often results in service denial, and the reliability of a biometric technology, especially for manual labor in hot, humid climates, is questionable. It is said, while this observation is of relevance amid the government put to switch all payments under the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act NREGS to an Aadhaar-based payment system. It echoes the concerns raised ever since its launch under the United Progressive Alliance regime. The vigorous pursuit of Aadhaar after some initial hesitation under the present government has manifested in the 12-digit number becoming mandatory for almost all welfare benefit to weaker section, as well as activities such as opening bank or provident fund accounts, securing telephone connections, and remitting taxes. It uses backed by the expansion of access to no frills bank accounts and mobile phone connections has indeed enabled the direct transfer to benefits to millions of in welfare schemes and weeding out ghosts and middlemen. Yet there have been also been instances of people being excluded from basic services for lack of Aadhaar or laborers and senior citizens struggling to confirm their fingerprints and retina scans to prove they exist. An audit of unique identity identification authority of India by the Controller and Auditor General of India released last year has flagged lapses that jeopardize privacy and compromised data security along with flaws in enrollment process leading to duplication and faulty biometrics. India has pushed for digital public infrastructure like the one built around the edifice of Aadhaar as a means for service delivery in G20 nations and beyond having 1 second and beyond having appointed a part-time chief to the UIDAI last month after 4 years, the government must seek an honest review and course correction in Aadhaar program before expanding its linkage further, be it for electoral rules, private entities or MG and NREGA payments. Next, with climate change tackling new disease scenarios. In its latest report released this March, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change (IPCC) delivers a stark warning: climate change highlighting the global risk of infectious disease. The close relationship between climate and disease is being demonstrated every year. For instance, the periodicity of mosquito-borne disease outbreaks no longer follows expected patterns. Dengue manifests in 2 to 3 peaks throughout the year. Variability in temperature, precipitation, and humidity disrupt disease transmission cycles. These also alter the distribution of the vector and animal reservoirs that host the parasite. Heat has been proven to interfere with the genomic structure of pathogens, changing their infectivity and virulence. Climate change more infectious. Habitat loss forces disease-carrying animals to encroach upon human territory, increasing the risk of human-animal interactions and the transfer of pathogens from wildlife to humans. Versus which do not harm animals can be fatal for humans. Nipah virus, which has been causing outbreaks in Kerala for many years now, is a good example. An analysis of 2022 published in Nature Climate Change warns that humans now face a broader spectrum of infectious agents than ever before. Over half of all known infectious diseases threatening human portion with changing climate patterns. Diseases often find new transmission routes, including environmental sources, medical tourism, and contaminated food and water from once reliable sources. While ecosystems shape local climate change is transforming ecosystem. This dynamic introduces invasive species and extends the range of existing life from both these triggers of evils in ecosystem that are complex and co-found ecologists and epidemiologists to predict outbreak. Human induced climate change is unleashing an unprecedented health vulnerability crisis. India in particular has felt the ominous impact with early summer and erratic monsoons causing water scarcity across the Gangetic Plains and Kerala. These climatic shifts are manifesting in severe health crises, including a dengue epidemic in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and Kolkata, and a Nipah outbreak in Kerala. Why should we not be surprised at the recent outbreak in Kolkata, Kerala, or at its own seasonality? Surveillance and reporting. Changed disease scenarios require a revision of strategies to detect and deal with them. Over the past 2 decades, India has improved its reporting of outbreaks. The integrated disease surveillance program was rolled out in a few states in 2007. From reporting 553 outbreaks in 2008, it reported 1714 in 2017. It was phased out in favor of a new web-enabled near real electronic information system called Integrated Health Information Platform (ISIP) was launched in 7 states in 2018. It added 20 additional disease conditions over IDSP's 13 and could present disaggregated data to its users. Tragically, the program, which would have enabled real-time tracking of emerging disease outbreaks, has not delivered on expectations. The current design of surveillance is not adequate for the emerging disease scenario. Mitigating the spread of climate change-induced disease requires safeguarding ecosystem, curbing greenhouse gas emissions, and implementing action pathogen surveillance and a unified approach termed One Health, which integrated monitoring human, animal, plant, and environmental health recognizes this interconnectedness. This approach is pivotal in preventing outbreaks, especially those that originate from animals. It encompasses zoonotic disease, neglected tropical disease, vector-borne disease, antimicrobial resistance, and environmental contamination. India must launch One Health and infectious disease control program led by building greater synergies between the center and state and their variety specialized agency, animal husbandry, forest and wildlife, municipal corporation and public health department need to converge and set up robust surveillance system. More importantly, they will need to build trust and confidence, share data and devise logical lines and responsibility and work with a coordinating agency. So far, the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Prime Minister has been taking this lead, but with new World Bank and other large funding in place, this will need greater coordination and management. Disease X and beyond. Globally, there is an obsession with the enigmatic disease X, but it is the familiar annual cycles of known agents such as influenza, measles, Japanese encephalitis, dengue, diarrhea, among others that will continue to test the public health system. Climate change is not limited to infectious disease; it also exaggerates injuries and death from the extreme weather events, respiratory and cardiovascular disease, and mental health issues. The re-emergence of Nipah in Kerala is a wake-up call that mere biomedical responses to disease in is inadequate in the face of a changing climate and the growing threat of infectious disease. Protecting ecosystem, fostering collaboration, and embracing the One Health paradigm are our best defenses. The road ahead demands concerted efforts not just to adapt but also to proactively safeguard our planet and its inhabitants. Then next, the story super. Ukraine, which launched a counter-offensive against the invading Russian troops with advanced Western weapons and NATO-trained soldiers in June, has made incremental territorial gains but yet to clinch a major breakthrough. 3 months later, as the offensive grinds on, the Ukrainians have said that they would continue fighting to reclaim the land lost to Russians and have asked for more military aid from the West. The US and its allies seem willing to provide more assistance, but there is skepticism on whether Ukraine would meet its military objectives. What was the Ukraine's original plan? ये वाला जो आर्टिकल है इसका जो हेडलाइन है इज यूक्रेन से काउंटर ऑफेंसिव वर्किंग. ये वाला हेडलाइंस को हम जो देख रहे हैं मैं एडिट करने के वाला टाइम वो दे नहीं पाया. ठीक है. What was Ukraine's original plan? Ukraine has prepared for months before it launched the counter-offensive in June. In the preceding months, its Western allies had supplied highly advanced weapons, including Patriot missile defense system HIMAR and MLRS rockets Striker and Bradley armored vehicle Challenger and Leopard 2 main battle tanks and Storm Shadow long-range cruise missiles beside artillery cells and ammunition. The plan as leaked US classified documents so was to conduct a classic blitzkrieg, a lightning operation with an armored strike force piercing through Russia's line of defense, capturing territories and delivering a blow to Russian positions in eastern and southern Ukraine. Kiev opened three axes in its counter-offensive Orikhiv in the south, in Zaporizhia, Velyka Novosika in the Zaporizhia-Donetsk border area in the middle of the front line and Bakhmut in the Donetsk. The main objective was to reach Melitopol and Sea of Azov to cut off Russia's land bridge from the mainland to Crimea. The Black Sea Peninsula it annexed in 2014 through a controversial referendum and gained territories in the east. If Russia loses Melitopol, it would push pressure on its hold on Crimea, disrupt its supply lines, and allow Ukrainians to target Berdyansk and Mariupol further north. What happened to the strategy? Ukraine's plan to take a quick victory against Russian forces was doomed to fail from the very beginning. Ruth Jones Mearsheimer, American international relations scholar, he said that there were 11 blitzkrieg operations since modern tanks arrived on the battlefield, and in most cases, the attackers with substantially higher capabilities against the defender tested victory with what he calls an unfair fight. In the case of Ukraine, Russia had built three lines of defense along the front line with its trenches, landmines, heavy weapons, and other front fortifications. The prolonged battle for Bakhmut, which culminated in the Russian taking the city in May, pinned down thousands of Ukrainian troops in the eastern city while providing more time to the Russians to build their defenses. Ukraine, which is reliant on old Soviet-style fighter jets, also lacked advanced air cover, which is imperative for any Belgian operation. So, when Ukraine finally launched the counteroffensive, its troops jumped straight into the trap led by Russia. According to a report in the New York Times, Ukraine lost some 20% of the weaponry it got from the West in the first 2 weeks of the counteroffensive, as Ukraine realized that the Blitzkrieg was not working. It changed its tactics from attempting for a major thrust into Russian defenses to small operations targeting the near Russia's military missions while employing long-range fire to attack the enemy's supply lines. This allowed Ukraine to take some small village along the front line, but breaching the Russian defenses remained a distant goal. How did Russia slow down Ukrainian advances? In the initial phase of the war, Russia made a lot of mistakes. Its plan was to capture territories quickly and hold them was a limited number of forces. Some 190,000 troops were mobilized for the invasion, but when the Ukrainians resisted, denying a quick victory to Russia, it both exposed Moscow's weakness and opened new avenues for the West to step in. Last year, Russia was forced out of Kharkiv by a swift Ukrainian advance, and later on, Moscow decided to pull back its troops from the western bank of Dnipro in Kherson. Since then, Russia has changed its focus from offensive operation to defense its traditional force. Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, ordered a partial mobilization, drafting some 3 lakh men who the Russian hoped would solve the manpower shortage that plagued their initial thrust into Ukraine. Since Kherson pulled out, Russia's territorial advances were limited to Donetsk. It took Soledar in January and Bakhmut in May, though in the operation mostly involving the Wagner private military company, besides its trenches filled with explosive and miles deep trip wide or booby trapped mines, Russian troops also used the ISDM Zemledli mine-laying system that spread mines from the rockets at a rapid pace on the front line. Russia used this tactic, according to the Ukraine officials, to rapidly remine cleared areas, often trapping advancing Ukrainian troops within circles of minefields. In the early stage of war, Russia lost dozens of its fighter jets. Now, analysts note the Russian Air Force remains intact through it, though it still lacks air superiority. They also use precision guided bombs released from low altitude jets or attack helicopters are targeting positions well beyond Ukraine's defense lines. They have also deployed attacks helicopters, anti-tank missiles, and artillery on the front line, which made advances extremely difficult for the Ukrainian troops. As Ukraine makes slow progress on the battlefield, it also gives the Russian time to refortify the defense lines or remind the cleared areas. What has been the worst response? The U.S. intelligence agency has had expressed their skepticism about the counteroffensive well before it was launched. In February, leaked U.S. intelligence document showed the bleak assessment of the counteroffensive by Washington, according to documents labeled as top secret. U.S. agencies had assessed that Ukraine's operation would result only in the modest territorial gains and could fall well short of its goals. The U.S., which has supplied military aid worth $40 billion to Ukraine since the war began, seemed to have realized weeks into the counteroffensive that things were not looking good for Ukraine. In early July, the Biden administration announced that it would send cluster munitions to Ukraine, which have been banned by over 100 countries for the indiscriminate harm they cause to civilians. As Ukrainian offensive went on with meager results. Questions started rising from allies about its tactics. According to Financial Times report, U.S. officials say Ukraine was risk adverse and failed to execute an effective campaign combining infantry, artillery, and air power. Ukrainian soldiers challenged the U.S. criticism, asking when was the last time American troops fought a conventional war with an equal force on the battlefield. Jean-Marc Millet, chairman of Joint Chief of Staff, said in a recent interview that the U.S. has been cleared about the challenges before Ukraine. I had said a couple of months ago that this exactly what is long bloody and it's very difficult fight. A latest US intelligence assessment stated that the counteroffensive would fail to reach Mariupol, a key Ukrainian goal, according to a report in Washington Post that cited unnamed American officials. But these difficulties do not mean that the US is having a rethink in its approach. Last week, President Joe Biden decided to send long-range army tactical missile system to Ukraine, which would allow Kyiv to target Russian positions well beyond the front lines. US supplied Abrams main battle tanks are set to enter the battlefield soon, according to the Pentagon. President Biden is also seeking an additional $24 billion in aid for Ukraine. Then next Indo-Pacific region, a wave of interdependencies. Army chief. The Indo-Pacific region is not merely a collection of nations but a web interdependency. Army Chief General Manoj Pandey said on Tuesday. He said that apart from challenges exclusively in the maritime domain, a wide range of security and humanitarian concerns existed on land, while making a tactic reference to China's land reclamation in South China Sea without directly naming it, turning land power decisive. The Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, General Randy George, stressed the need to deepen unity and collective community commitment. They were addressing a press conference on the 13th Indo-Pacific Army Chief Conference that India is hosting for the first time along with the US and involves 30 countries with its 20 chiefs president. The 47th Indo-Pacific Army's management system are and 19th senior enlisted leaders forum self are also being held alongside the IPACC. Apart from challenges exclusively in maritime domain, a wide range of security and humanitarian concerns exist on land too. These range from territorial disputes over land masses or in some cases even over artificially expanded islands to acquire real estate and establish military bases, transnational threats of terrorism, consequences of climate change impacting the inhabited islands of coastal areas of rim nations and natural calamities. General Pandey said addressing the opening session. He said these challenges are manifesting as threats singularly or plurally impacting one or more nations and stressed that cooperation amongst land forces hence was a critical component of collective response. In response to a question from the Hindu on China's rapid expansion in the region, General George said this region was critically important to the US. It is why it is why we are out here and why I think we exercise more than anywhere else in the Pacific. Why what this conference provides and what we are after here is unity and commitment and the strength here, he said. Security challenges. Addressing the conference, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh said the Indo-Pacific was no more a maritime construct but a full-fledged geostrategic construct and noted that the region was facing a complex web security challenges including boundary disputes and piracy. General Pandey said that the region was beyond bound by geography and destinies are intertwined. The security and prosperity of one nation was intrinsically linked to the security and prosperity of its neighbors and much beyond. He said land power not only contributes to shared the security. General George said terming it decisive the land power network that all chiefs and at IPCC are building it is the security architecture that binds the region together. He said, adding that unity and commitment are the best deterrents. The 19th edition of India-US bilateral army exercise Youth Abhyas commenced on Monday at Fort Wainwright, Alaska, in the US with the theme "Employment of an Integrated Battle Group in the Mountain Extreme Climate Conditions" and will go until October 8. Previous edition was hosted by India at Auli in Uttarakhand last November. Days when a few nations set agenda are over, Jaishankar tells UNGA. Addressing the 78th session of United Nations General Assembly, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar spoke in the strong terms of a more equitable and democratic world order emerging, the one that was more reflective of diverse interest. She linked these diverse interest to India's G20 presidency, saying that the days when a few nations see said the agenda were over, while the rules-based order and UN Charter were invoked in deliberations. It was still a few nations that shaped the agenda and sought to set norms. Mr. Jaishankar told the General Assembly in New York on Tuesday morning. A fair, equitable, and democratic order will surely emerge once we all put our minds to it, and for the start, that means ensuring that rule makers do not subjugate rule takers. He said that, adding that vaccine apartheid should never be allowed to recur, and climate action must address historically responsibilities. The idea is that wealthy countries must sufficiently finance the response to climate change. Mr. Jaishankar was speaking at the end of a week of national addresses where Russia's invasion of Ukraine has continued to remain a focus, especially in the speechless speeches of Western leaders. However, a second issue emerged last week with an explosive allegation by Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that the government of India was involved in assassinating a Khalistani separatist leader in the British Columbia in June. Not most, nor must we countenance that political contrivance determines responses to terrorism, extremism, and violence. Mr. Jaishankar told the United Nations, presumably referring to countries such as Pakistan and China, but also Canada, which India has accused of coddling separatists such as pro-Khalistani leaders. Similarly, respect for the territorial integrity and non-interference in the internal affairs cannot be exercised in the cherry picking. He added the minister spoke of Indian G20 presidency as catering for divergences and called for the reformed United Nations and other multilateral institutions. COVID-19 and ongoing conflicts, a likely reference to Ukraine, had rolled back socio-economic gains. He said, adding that India had taken up the G20 presidency with a sense of exceptional responsibility. He pointed to a deep divide between the global north and south and polarization between the east and the west. The international order is diverse, and we must cater for divergence, if not differences. He said, New Delhi is supposed to have the African Union join the G20 should Mr. Jaishankar said inspired the much older United Nations the nation to reform the Security Council. Mr. Jaishankar's United Nation address also emphasized the BJP party lines and practices. In several instances, he invoked the idea of Amrit Kal, a term first used by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in 2021 to describe the development and used Bharat in some instances instead of India. Starting his address with Namaste from Bharat, the minister ended it by referring to India, that is Bharat, citing India's membership of diverse groupings including the Quad, India, Australia, Japan, and the US, the expanded BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and the I2U2 India, Israel, and US and the UAE. Mr. Jaishankar argued that India had moved from the non-alignment era to one of Vishwamitra, a friend to the world. This reflected India's ability to work with a diverse set of nations and harmonize interests when necessary. He said India aspired to be a leading power not for self-aggrandizement But to take on greater responsibility, Mr. Jaishankar said India was confident that it would be propelled forward by its talent and creativity. He said as he cited the Chandrayaan-3 moon landing, the goal we have set for ourselves will make us different from all those whose rise preceded ours. He added, referring presumably to China's rise but also to the US and former colonial powers like Britain. And Indians eat more salt than WHO recommendations. The estimated means daily salt intake in India stands at 8 gram or 8.9 gram a day for men and 7.1 gram a day for a woman. Against the World Health Organization (WHO) recommendation of up to 5 gram daily, a study has found the salt intake was significantly higher among men, those in rural areas, and overweight and obese respondents, according to a recent survey by the Indian Council of Medical Research (ICMR) published in the journal Nature. The study carried out as part of National Non-Communicable Disease Monitoring Survey in India noted that the sample population had a low perception in the harmful effects of high salt intake and practices to limit consumption. The mean dietary salt intake is high in the Indian population, which calls for planning and implementing control of dietary salt consumption measures. We need to cut down on eating processed foods and those who cooked outside home. 10,659 adults aged 18 to 69 years participated in the survey. Response the rate of 96.3%, said Prashant Mathur, lead author of the study and director of the ICMR National Center for Disease Informatics and research. The study notes that salt intake was higher in employed people's 8.6 gram and tobacco users 8.3 grams and those with high blood pressures 8.5 grams. It specifies that in reducing the intake is a beneficial and cost effective way to bring down elevated blood pressure by 25% and advocates a 30% reduction in mean population salt intake by 2025. It found that less than half of the participants practiced measures to control dietary salt intake, and the most commonly adopted step to prevent salt overdose was avoiding meals outside homes. Cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular disease account for an estimated 28.1% of the total deaths in the India in 2016. 1.63 million deaths were attributed to the hypertension as against 0.78 million deaths in the 1998. The study said the study was conducted in the nationally representative sample wherein dietary sodium intake was estimated from the spot urine samples. A validated method used to assess dietary sodium intake. The population meal was calculated using sampling weights. Thus, the study findings could be generalized at a population level and used to plan and implement dietary salt control measures. The information on awareness and behavior of salt intake was self-reported and could be subjected to basis information bias. The study did not capture data on the actual dietary sources of salt in food items and condiments. For any corrections analysis, the report said while declaring the limitation of the study. The 95% of components used in Indian rockets indigenous, says ISRO chief at a CSIR event. Nearly 95% of the components used in the rockets, including those used in Chandrayaan 3 mission, were made in India and were a result of several years of development involving the India Space Research Organization and Indian industries. S. Somnath, chairman Indian Space Research Organization, said at the Foundation Day for Day celebration of the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research (ICSIR) in New Delhi, these have not come about just like that and have come over several years and is a result of a collaboration with various agencies including Indian laboratories, national labs, defense labs, and CSIR labs focusing on material indigenization, technology capabilities, and research. He said the ISRO built its own lithium-ion batteries for space applications and was now in the process of transferring it to industry. He added several key components were made at Chandigarh's Semiconductor Laboratory (SCL), and only about 5% of high-end electronics were imported for the space missions. It is not a supercomputer, but enough to run a rocket and take it safely into space. The battery system, storage, solar cells, we have been doing this over a long time and have created an industry capable of doing all of this, he said prior to a ceremony to facilitate the winners of the CSIR Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize, awarded annually to recognize scientists aged under 45 who have done exceptional work in previous years. Jitendra Singh, Minister of Science and Technology, said that India was seeing a sea change in the way the organization was being led and geared to address not only national aspirations but also to contribute to socio-economic growth.